Welcome to the isolation haircut. It's a world where you have no chance to get a haircut. It's amazing, so your hair looks amazing. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a brand new video. Now, I did a poll for this video on my Instagram page, and I asked you guys whether you would like to see a full behind the scenes of me creating a podcast. So I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do this quite yet, because I'm just sort of doing it on the fly. Sometimes I script this content, sometimes I don't. I'm going to do an attempt and see how I feel about it and see what I think about this video just by speaking and explaining my process, and then hopefully adding B-roll over the top. So enjoy. So the first process, I would say, or the first thing that's important about the podcast is understanding who and what you're actually going to talk about as well, because you can't just go into a podcast and be like, let's have a chat, because it won't then be appealing and won't really have a point. But the main thing for me about why I'm running the podcast, why I wanted to run the podcast, why I wanted to have a podcast, is to give another medium in which I can talk to you guys and talk to other business people about advice and add value in something that they may know or something I may know, or a mix between the two, and share our opinions on how we've overcome challenges such as COVID-19, for example, as a challenge which we're all trying to overcome and push through and move through. As of the time of recording this video, it's currently the 23rd of May 2020, and we're still in the middle of a global pandemic that will probably unfortunately be in for a while, but our new normal will be upon us before we know it. But anyway, that's a depressing topic. To talk about podcasts is what we're talking about today. So the podcasts, as I run them anyway, they are a visual experience in some ways as well, not in a similar way of just me recording a Zoom call. Personally, I do use Zoom for most of my podcasting and most of my podcast content in that respect. So the first stage is firstly looking for people and finding guests. This is mainly going to be talking from the guest perspective. I have done some solo podcasts, and that process is very similar when it comes to post-production, but it's more about me planning what I want to talk about and then just talking about those things. But something I've been really doing a lot of during this pandemic and during this time while we're all at home is really honing my interview skills and being able to really be in a situation where I can come out of it stronger from an interview perspective, and also allow me to build those connections with those people who I may already have a connection with, or possibly will really look to build a connection with long term as well. So they could be someone whose content I really enjoy, or they could be someone who I really look up to in the respect to from a longer term perspective of, like, for example, with the episode I did with Matt, he's someone I've been following for a long time and someone I was really pleased to be able to come and talk to on the podcast as well. I think there was a lot of value in that episode as well, hearing it from his perspective. But moving on to the more like logistical understandings. So when you have your people or your person that you're going to interview, or your group of people you're going to interview, then I would say you need to come up, and what I did very early on was I came up with a short document that gives some icebreaker questions, because there's always that little bit of awkwardness when you walk into a podcast or when you start doing a podcast. No matter how confident or well you feel specifically, there is always going to be a little bit of awkwardness. So moving a little bit back to how to actually find people. So the first thing I did was really look at my network of people who I know, who I think could add value and have an in-depth conversation with about whether that's content creation or whether that's something a little bit more on the creative spectrum, or a psychological discussion, or depending on the kind of topics that I wanted to cover in that week's podcast. So yeah, that's kind of been like when I have those people, and I kind of book in people who, as I say, can add value. But when you've got those people, you schedule in a time that hopefully works with them and everyone's happy. Then we jump on Zoom. And then the thing that I found works best, because I like to be able to balance levels and be able to briefly change the levels of my mic, because I find sometimes, even though my microphone setup is really good and I really like the sound that comes out of it, because I'm not using a pop filter or etc., some of the time I can breathe into the microphone, which will be something I will eventually resolve by obtaining a pop filter and using a pop filter. You can use a sock, those who are looking for budget options, but I will eventually have ordered a real pop filter for this mic, the mic behind me, which is an AQ 2020, those who are interested. And that's my main podcasting mic, and that gives me the cleanest quality. But unfortunately, with some people who aren't necessarily in video production or aren't necessarily in production at any level, you have to kind of deal with their inbuilt mics on their phones or etc. That in most cases is fine, but just keep this in mind. So moving back to practicality about how I actually film it. So what I do is I record my mic with Audacity, and then I run the Zoom capture recording audio-wise just into OBS. Now in OBS, what you can do is you can set 2 channels. So it will either record your mic in one channel and then record the Zoom or the system audio in a different channel. Now, something I'm circumventing by using Audacity to film my mic and record my mic is so I can change those levels, because I don't trust OBS's channels, because when you actually set them up to do it properly, I've found that sometimes it will just not record a channel, in my experience. So, and when you're only have been given access to someone, or you've only really got someone for an hour, then it's really important that you make sure you nail their audio and make sure you nail your own audio. So I don't leave anything up to chance in respect to I don't rely on OBS just to record those audio inputs. Now, it would make my life a lot easier if that was, because it would allow me to just have one clip that was already synced up. But to be honest, in most cases, because I don't use the Zoom video for how I do my personal podcasts, it's probably something that would be easier, and I find very easy to actually kind of get around in that respect, because you don't necessarily see any desyncing, because you don't see someone's mouth talking in that respect. So it's really important when you're doing a piece of camera like this that you do have your mic synced with your mouth, because it would be very disconcerting when someone's talking if their words were not in sync. But when it's just audio and you don't necessarily see someone talking in that respect, then there will not necessarily be that issue. I mean, briefly going on how you can really up the production quality of your podcast, probably post-COVID now, because it would be very difficult to do with the whole, you're not going to meet up with people, you're not going to bring in people, etc. And of course, by doing it through video conference, it is a little bit easier to talk to people in America and talk to people in other time zones and people who are not local to you as well. But ideally, something which I want to do with the podcast anyway is film them professionally in the respect to with professional content creation kit such as GX5s and etc. like that, to have a higher level of production in regards to those podcasts. But at the end of the day, what you say is actually what matters, instead of it being specifically how it looks in that respect, because as long as it's audible and you can hear what the person is saying, then that is all that matters regarding podcast content, at least. So when I have my interview ready, I've got my questions I talked about that I normally send to the person I'm interviewing a little bit ahead so they can briefly prepare. Sometimes I send them a little bit of curveballs, and when questions come to mind from what they're saying, and I think follow-up questions, but I use those as a base to really build our interview from. So then we jump into a call, we record the interview. Normally, in most cases nowadays, I try to hit about an hour long in the respect to how long I'm really aiming this podcast to be. Now, in some cases that might be 40 minutes, in some cases that might be an hour and 40 minutes. Really depends on the kind of person who you're talking to, really depends on how deep the conversation you want to go is. And also, something which I've found is really, really good and really, really helpful at times is also to make sure that you, when you don't try and drag out the conversation, just to drag it out. If you've kind of reached the point where you feel you've covered everything that you wanted to cover, give your guest an opportunity to bring up anything that they want to specifically bring up. That might, artificially bring more to the conversation, and then that might trigger you to have more ideas on what questions and what things they would like to actually build on. But overall, if you kind of come up to this kind of natural end, then just thank them and then end off the podcast there. There's always going to be, I always find anyway, that when you're in a conversation with someone, that it's normally quite good, and it's normally really good and kind of easy once you're in it. But the very start of a Zoom call and the very end of a Zoom call is normally the most awkward parts of that process. But when you've got that podcast filmed and you are good to go, you're going to stop your OBS recording, you're going to save your audio in Audacity, you're going to put it all into a lovely folder, it's going to be lovely and organized. Then you're going to bring that, personally, this is just how I do it, then you're going to bring that into Premiere. Then you're going to have a little look and you're going to line those up. So you're going to bring in the guest audio, you're going to bring in your own audio. Now, personally, I don't do intros and outros when I'm actually interviewing with the guest because I feel it would just kind of bog down those episodes or bog down those interviews. And I really want to get into, especially it's about just optimizing that time because I only, in most cases, because of their schedules or my schedules, we only have like an hour or we only have like an hour and a half because of other commitments that they may have or I may have. So that's mainly why I look to really just try and use that time the most effectively to get the most value from that podcast filming session as well. So that's why I don't do intros and outros. But then what I'll do is I will go through, I will do my best to sync up the audio so that when I ask a question, they answer it, cut out any pauses, any ums, any mistakes, any like when I have to re-ask a question or whether they like are like, oh, I re-said something, can we redo it? And then I'm like, yeah, of course, that kind of thing. So you just sort of neaten up the podcast audio, really. And then you have what basically then becomes a master interview file. And after that, what you do, what I do personally anyway, is I throw on an intro, I throw on an outro, which I record separately in Audacity. So I record those separately in Audacity, and then I put those on each end, pop those on, do any like crossfading and any little neaten up and EQ and some of the audio, specifically, you know, just really making that audio a lot more richer and a lot better than it comes out of the microphone. So if you would like me to do, I'm not going to go too in detail about my audio overall managing and my EQ and that kind of thing in this video, but if you would like me to do a more in-depth video on that process specifically, then I'm more than happy to do so. So just let me know in the comment section down below. And if you are enjoying this video, make sure to leave with a like. But moving back to then what you have. So then what you want to do is you render out that file. Sometimes this can take a while, depending on how long the interview is. Then I bring that file into After Effects, where I will add my images and my little voice memo waveform that everyone seems to be giving me questions about and asking about. So I'm going to do a brief tutorial in this video on how to do that as well. It's actually built-in effect in After Effects, which I found really, really cool and really, really awesome. Personally now, all I do, because I use the same waveform across the board in that respect, as I say, I will do a more detailed tutorial later on in time as well to really go in the details of how to actually create that. But basically you just go into the effect panel. I believe it's something along the lines of like audio wave or something like that. I'll show it on screen now, and then you just bring it in. You set the source to be the master file, which you just exported from Premiere or Audacity, depending on how you want to organize your audio and really mix your audio. And then you can set that to your image, which you just bring in. You scale it accordingly, so you have your beautiful frame. That's going to be your video frame that I used personally. I had some personal branding and branding photos taken from me before lockdown of 3 or 4 shoots, and I'm going to, moving forward, always try to have a photographer or a videographer or both on shoots with me whenever I do shoots, because it's very useful, especially in this case, to specifically have those images to use for other content such as the podcast. So when you're happy with that, you then set that to render. That will be your master file that in most cases you'll take and upload to YouTube and Facebook and wherever you want to distribute it. Personally, that's where I distribute the full episodes for those who are interested. And then once you've done that, you can bring that file back into Premiere. And then what I try to do is I try to re-listen to the interview, make sure I'm 100% happy before I upload it. This is where I can make any final cuts, any final breaks, like I was editing an episode last night, for example, where I noticed I left some weird pauses, so I just wanted to cut those out, and then I re-rendered it and then put that back up online. So when they are ready, then I go through the episode and I kind of try and take out 3 to 4 chunks of the episode, like a minute to a minute and a half, little sound bites to upload onto socials. So I'll do this for LinkedIn, I'll do this for Twitter, and I'll do this for Instagram as well. which is basically just to hint at and sort of introduce the fact that there's going to be a podcast going live that day. So in most cases that's going to be a Monday, and then I can sort of hint at who's on the podcast, talk about who's on the podcast a little bit, and then also explain that it's going to go live at 6 p.m. Those who are following me on those channels and on those socials, they'll be able to see and they'll be able to enjoy that podcast when it comes out and when it goes live. And they may not necessarily want to see the podcast that week because it may not be on a topic they're interested in or with someone that they're particularly interested in as well. So it's also a way of me sort of mini promoting the audio based content that I'm doing as well. So that just works for me. Then when I've got that, I'll render those out as separate files. And then like when I've got everything uploaded, you go through the normal process you would do with any video, which is doing your titles, your descriptions, your tags, make sure your SEO is strong so that you can help those podcast content and that content in general really get views. Now, something which I want to briefly caveat this with is you should firstly never do anything to get views in that respect. You should never just do it. Excuse me. You should never just do it for the concept of actually just getting views. But something which you should do is you should always help your content get views or have the potential to get views by making sure your SEO is good and well and all good. So, you know, in that perspective, there's tips and tricks, and I'm happy to do some like SEO videos as well. So I really want to get back into doing YouTube, especially as I've got nothing else to do at the moment. I've got a lot of plans to do a lot of YouTube content, a lot of audio-based content, a lot of content in general to really help kind of you understand, if you're new to video, how you could be utilizing video from a business perspective, and also how you can get the most out of those bits of video and those things that you really invest in and really bring up in the respect to the SEO side of it as well, to make sure that those videos through time can serve you the best way. Now, what I've found personally is you'll have videos that will, in most cases, some will do really well at the start and then they'll sort of slowly die off, or you'll get videos that I call slow burners, which is the majority of most of the content I've found. Like, for example, videos that I just did for fun, like a lot of the tutorials, a lot of the guides, a lot of the things that people have been asking me that I think are valuable, have actually ended up getting views just because of SEO, because of how the titles were, how the descriptions were, how the thumbnails were, etc. And this is a longer topic that I'm happy to make some video content on if there is a demand for it. So let me know in the comment section down below. But then I schedule the podcast, moving slightly back to the point of this video, then I schedule the podcast, get it ready to go so it goes out at the same time on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And something which I'm debating around will be possibly premiering the episodes on the website podcast page an hour or so before they go out on my other socials. Something I'm planning around or thinking about. So let me know what your thoughts may be on that. But that is the overall main process for me creating podcast content, and a little bit of why I'm actually creating podcast content. Generally, if I'm being completely honest, podcast content for me has been very exciting and very interesting for me as a creator to really lean into and really see what I can do with, and something I've been really enjoying having those longer form conversations as well. But by no means does it replace or do I think it's going to replace video content, because I have got many plans for video content, as well as I briefly said in the start of this video, and I'm really hyped to be back on YouTube more consistently, and I'm hopefully going to be able to return to YouTube more consistently after COVID and after I get busy with client work and etc., to add even more value to you, and hopefully build up a following here a little bit as well. So if you are new and this is the first video you're seeing from me, then feel free to subscribe. It really helps the channel. But that is going to wrap up today's video, guys. I really appreciate you spending this time to look into my process, and those of you who are thinking about starting audio content, just do it. I've had a blast personally doing it, and I think that you may not be very good at it at the very start, as I wasn't, but like anything, if you are willing to put in the time and the dedication to be able to get good at it and really learn from your mistakes and really learn from what you're doing and really develop that kind of presence. It will, I think, really help build your overall confidence and your overall personality when it comes to something like this, which is a piece of camera, but also something which you can really use and really find, I think, will boost your confidence overall from a business perspective on who you can reach out to, why you can reach out to them, and how you really go about working with other creatives and other people and other businesses in that respect. So thank you very much, guys, for watching. Have a great rest of your day, evening, afternoon, whatever it is for you. And if you're watching this in the future or past COVID, welcome to being past COVID. And if you're watching this whilst COVID's happening, stay safe, look after the loved ones that you have as well as you can, and I hope everyone's staying well in this time, and look after your mental health, as it is really important as well. And my DMs are always open for anyone who is struggling at any time, especially now. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching once again, and I will see you very soon. Probably going to be, ideally, the plan, just to give a little brief update on the channel. Those of you who are here for the podcast stuff, that's obviously ended it a little bit ago. But my plan at the moment for YouTube is going to be ideally to have one podcast come out a week, and also then have at least one YouTube video come out a week. I think we might ramp that up a little bit depending on the videos that I plan to do. But yeah, I wanted to kind of hit the ground running and kind of do this one on the fly. We'll see what I think about it and how I think. But I have got a vlog that would have come out pre-lockdown. That was a behind-the-scenes vlog for my behind-the-scenes shoot I did for Pav. So yeah, that you'll be able to see here, and that would have just come out probably just before this. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you very soon, and enjoy the rest of your evening, day, or night.